So, Cory Campbell, you're running in District 57.
Yes,
which
that is correct.
That seat is currently occupied by incumbent DFLer Greg Clausen.
Yes, that is correct.
That is correct. Where geographically, District 57?
District 57 is all of Apple Valley, all of Rosemont, Northeast Lakeville, and the little town of Coates.
Okay. First question for candidates, new candidates, first time on the show. Who are you? Why are you running?
Again, I want to thank you for letting me come in here today. Again, I'm running for state senate. Again, I'm a little sensitive to the like government regulations and things like that because I lost my job to Obamacare.
Really? Obamacare came in and took your job?
Yeah, it took.
So your job is being done very poorly right now, and they're paying it a lot more.
Exactly. Yeah. And it actually eliminated our entire company.
No, really?
Yeah.
Right. Tell me that story.
No, I had worked, a little bit of background. I'd worked in the insurance industry a number of years. I was independent, and then I took a corporate job.
Okay.
About 3 years ago, and it was with Assurant Health. And it's an insurance company been in business over 120 years. And with the new healthcare rules and regulations and all that, Obamacare came in, and within 2 years, it eliminated the entire company. And what that meant is over 1 million people lost their insurance, and over 6,000 people lost their jobs, including over 500 here in Minnesota.
You must be confused because the president said if you like your insurance, you can keep your insurance.
Right.
It's sad
It's going to be cheaper.
It's sad that 1 million people didn't like your insurance.
I am...
No, is that not what happened?
That was good.
Yeah. No.
Was that a spit take over there? That was pretty good.
You got me right in the middle of a sip of coffee. That was a good one.
So, yeah, I am one of the victims of Obamacare. And
See, hear what happens when people lie.
yes.
When people pull things out of thin air. You like your insurance, you keep your insurance. You like your doctor, keep your doctor. Save $5,000 a year for your average family insurance costs. All of those prove to be lies. What happens is real people lose their jobs when that happens.
Right. They lose their job. They lose insurance. They lose their doctors. Except, it was a real, it's a real hassle, and it's a real mess.
So you lost your job a few years ago thanks to the Affordable Care Act,
Yes.
thanks to Obamacare, thanks to the rise of Minshore here in the state. And this got you looking at...
Well, this was about a year ago, actually. We signed our severance. It was like a year ago last week. And, so then I started looking for work again and everything else. And then, I found a new job. I do financial services. I've got a securities license and everything else like that. And then last November, went to a meet and greet. I wanted to meet Jason Lewis. He's now the Republican candidate in our congressional district, CD2 there.
I've heard of him.
Yep. Yeah. He's been on a little bit here, and he's pretty good in this industry. But I went to a meet and greet there. I wanted to meet him, and then I found out no one was running for Senate there in 57, and it started piquing my interest. And a couple weeks later, I'm basically announced, and I'm in. And
nice.
It's been a whirlwind ever since. And my platform is what the government is doing to our businesses and individuals.
Yeah.
And
firsthand experience.
Yeah, firsthand
being
experience.
A victim of over-regulating a particular industry and what that does to private businesses, what that does to corporations and people that are trying to make a living in that industry. You understand firsthand the nature and the dangers of over-regulation.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what I want to do is try to ease some of those burdens and regulations that the state puts onto our businesses and families.
I think that's a winning message.
Yeah.
I mean, I do. I believe that's a winning message, and that's what I like to hear from Republicans. That's what I like to hear from conservative candidates, because I think that's the issue that they win on almost more than anything else is what impact government has on marketplaces, on businesses, because every business started as a small business.
Yes, absolutely. And most people don't. The general public, a lot of times, they won't even actually. They don't realize how it actually affects them.
No.
I was talking to a gentleman probably about a month ago.
Hidden.
These are like hidden taxes, fees, et cetera. I was talking to a gentleman probably about a month ago, and I was just outdoor knocking, and I came up, and he owned a business, and his business has some locations, or they go in and out of Minneapolis, like a heating and cooling business. And this individual, with their sick leave ordinances that they may have, even though his business is not in Minneapolis, he has to comply with it because some of their jobs has to get permitted, and that's how they can actually enforce it over this business. He's going to probably have to hire someone at least on a part-time basis, to be able to comply with those rules and regulations. That doesn't sound like a lot. It's a business of, I think he had around 20 employees. Adding another part-time employee or something like that, it doesn't sound like a lot, but to this business, that's about at least a $20,000 to $30,000 added expense.
Those compliance costs that businesses have to endure, that businesses have to absorb, and not just for regulation, but for taxes, tax compliance, things like that. Not the taxes you pay, the cost you pay to just comply with tax law. Those are all hidden taxes.
That's hidden taxes,
because who pays those? Ultimately pays those.
It's the consumer.
You, the consumer, the customer of that business. Whatever business you go to, you are paying for their compliance with all these regulations that people applaud and pat themselves on the back for making other people do. You're paying for their complicated tax compliance codes that they have to hire outside firms or dedicated positions to fulfill. You, the consumer, are paying every one of those fees, and a lot of people just don't realize
they just don't see it. And
why don't we tax corporations more? Because the only person that pays those is the end consumer. Corporations, I don't care what you tax. Corporations don't pay taxes. They just don't. Consumers pay everything.
Right. It gets passed on. The business will have a certain profit line, and whatever else is above that just gets passed on.
Right.
And back to this with this gentleman, and how this gets passed on is like that's maybe a service call for these individuals to come out. Maybe it's $50. But now with this added expense that this business is going to have, that service call is now going to be $70, $75, and we will never see it. But that's, again, as we just talked about, that's an added burden or an added cost onto our businesses.
And some of those businesses, too, in Minneapolis, I have a good friend who had a restaurant on Hennepin Avenue, frequent caller of the show, Josh, who now lives in Hugo. He had a business in Minneapolis, and the regulations and the high property taxes drove him out of the city. It closed his business. He had a very successful cafe down there, and they're gone. How many restaurants are leaving Minneapolis because they can't, handle the burden of these not only regulations.
And it's not just restaurants. Restaurants make news. I mean, when a popular restaurant closes up.
How many businesses, like what Cory's talking about, like a heating business, are going to say, then I'm not getting a permit in Minneapolis anymore.
Right. It doesn't make news when a hardware shop or a knick-knack shop or a trinket shop or an antique shop decides not to renew their lease because the cost of doing business in Minneapolis has gotten too high, and they're just going to close up or they're going to move out to the burbs. That doesn't make news. Popular restaurant or popular club, sure, that'll get some headlines. People will pay attention to that. But it's more than just the restaurant industry. We've heard from a number of business owners in Minneapolis that have contacted this show, don't like to go on the air, don't necessarily want to go public because there's been retribution.
But I think also what you'll see in the next year or two is Chamber of Commerce and other business associations start to report businesses down in the city of Minneapolis. Watch for those stories. That will make headlines as well of, it's only 2% now, but gee, now we're down 5%. Now we're down 7% compared to where we were in 2016.
And it's because of busybody politicians who are nothing but glorified HOA, board members who like to feel good about themselves by patting themselves on the back by making other people do things.
No, you've got a point. I mean, it's like being in a homeowners association.
Yeah. And we make it difficult enough where we're going to make excessive burdensome regulation. We're going to make you put your schedules for your employees out a month or 6 weeks in advance. We're going to require minimum, significant, almost double minimum wage requirements for operation within the city of Minneapolis. And then... Oh, by the way, we're going to make it so you can't find anywhere to park in the city because we want to take away all of those surface parking lots so that no one can actually get down there if they wanted to. We had the story of Andrew trying to go down for a Twins game.
Right.
Oh, that's right.
Where you just drove around for an hour and then just drove home with your family.
Couldn't find a place to park.
And you've got the story of Acme Comedy Company that's probably going to close because they're going to lose their parking.
Yeah.
And that's, he said, what did he say? Instantly it's going to lose 20% of his customers?
Yep.
That's ridiculous.
Yep.
But, and to add to that, Nick, what else are we seeing here? Oh, who else is profiting from this? Oh, that'd be the unions, because they're leading this effort and to get more membership into and more fees into their structure.
Right. They don't care about the viability of the business long term. They care about
their plan.
Getting more members. You care about getting more members because they realize that, without more members, they're going to fade away into irrelevancy.
And on the union angle, remember what we've seen in California and around the country. The push to the $15 minimum wage has an exception. If you employ union members, you don't have to have that $15 minimum wage. So SEIU and all the unions get all their members to bang the drum and do the march, unwittingly signing up for the fact that those union businesses will be the ones exempted from the $15 an hour minimum wage. We've seen that in every major metropolitan area. That
cracks me up.
That has passed the $15 minimum wage.
Right.
I went to a convention in Ohio last year, and Cory, I'm sorry that we're taking so much of your time.
This is the easiest interview you've ever done, isn't it?
That's fine.
I went to a convention where they had a lot of SEIU and other laborers gathering to protest because this was kind of a big Republican gathering, conservative side. And they had their people out there marching and yelling and screaming and bullhorns and puppets. And I was walking somewhere near that convention center. I was talking to a woman who was holding some union material, and she looked kind of sad. And I said, "What's going on?" She goes, "I just found out I'm not getting paid today." And she got on the bus, and she was mad because she had signed up to go help this union out, and she found out she wasn't getting paid.
Wow. Well, I'm glad to see a Republican candidate, Cory Campbell, we're talking to, running for Senate District 57. I'm really glad to see that this is going to be a major focus of your campaign, because one of the frustrations I have, and people give me grief all the time because I'm a libertarian. I've been a member of the Libertarian Party for, 15 years at least. But one of my frustrations with Republicans is I think that's like one of the biggest issues that Republicans should be focusing on, should be talking about getting government out of your lives, getting government out of your businesses, getting government out of the way, and letting commerce happen, letting economics happen, and not artificially increasing costs on business when the economy naturally is already in a very delicate and rough state. Just get out of the way. So I'm really, really encouraged, and I applaud you for making this a centerpiece of your campaign.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And to follow up a little bit with Nick, is what people don't realize is the wages is just one part of the expense that the business has. You have unemployment compensation. You match FICA. There are all these other costs. So that $15 an hour wage is not $15 to the business. You're probably looking at something at $22 to $23 an hour.
Yeah.
And a lot of them businesses, they just flat can't afford it.
Yep. And what's unfortunate is when you impose all these regulations on businesses, the wages becomes one of the only costs that a business has control over.
Correct.
They can't control what sort of compliance costs are put into place. They can't control tax rates. They can't control all of these regulatory costs that are associated with them. They just have to pay them. Those are flat expenses that they can't do anything about. So they have to make up for it, they have to look at the two areas that they do have control over: how much they charge for their services, which increases prices to the end consumer, and how much they're paying in overhead. Most of the time in most businesses, that number one cost is going to be wages. And they got to figure out how to either raise revenue or cut expenses.
Yeah, I was actually
Who loses at the end? Either the consumer or the worker, sometimes both.
I was talking to another Senate candidate the other day, and he was in one of the businesses, and he saw all these permits on the wall, and I got to go out and visit this business. He says these permits are $80,000 a year.
Whoa. Wow.
What? I got to go check this out. I got to see this.
Wait, what? How much?
$80,000 for this for these permits of various.
I bet there's a family out there that sure would like somebody working in their household that's making that much.
Yeah.
Wow.
I bet there's a couple workers that would gladly split that salary amongst them.
Oh, absolutely.
Right?
And and like I said, I have an insurance license, and the process for people to get licensed is really kind of convoluted. Like I said, I already had the license, so I didn't have to go through that. But a lot of people, when we started at the back at Assurant Health, there was a class of 25, and there's 3 of us that already had a license. But the other 22, you have to get licensed. And in order to do that, the state of Minnesota requires you to sit in class for 40 hours. Mm-hmm. And 2 of those days are on homeowners, and it's on car and home. which has nothing you're going to be tested on, et cetera. It's just completely irrelevant. Now, we're working for a health insurance carrier. We're going to sell health insurance.
Right.
We also have to, in Minnesota, you also have to get a life insurance license, which on the test is by far the most complicated. It's the harder part of the test. Mm-hmm. So we had 5 individuals not pass their test, not be able to get a job because they couldn't pass the test on stuff that they will never sell anyway.
Yeah.
And I think this is something that the legislature is starting to want to look at, is the licensing of some of these various industries and things, and should that be easier, et cetera.
Nick and I have had that conversation a couple times on the show's licensing requirements, and there are a lot of instances where it makes sense. It's not a cut and dry sort of area where you want to just get out of the licensing business altogether. But, the point of the license, in my opinion, should always be to protect the end consumer from fraudulent activity, from people who could do them harm if they are not properly trained.
And to Cory's point, have whatever you're going to be tested or trained on as part of your license be relevant to
and reasonable
what you're actually going to be doing. And we saw that with the eyebrow threading,
right.
where they were going to want licensed cosmetologists with this huge burden of education that hundreds of hours that nowhere in that curriculum ever touched on eyebrow threading in the entire curriculum. And so he said, no, that makes no sense. There has to be a better way.
Right, and this stuff all costs money. It costs a lot of money. The testing and everything, it makes it harder for individuals to get into work, into business, and it's an added burden.
651-989-5855 is the phone number. We are up against a break. Got a couple people that have called in. We're going to keep you around for another segment. Cory Campbell, Senate candidate. That's NASCAR Kelly. That's Nick Zerwas. We'll be right back.
Let's go! You're Sean at a trip to our iHeartRadio Music Festival. Now, text the word FUN to 200-200. You'll receive a confirmation text, standard message, and data rates apply. That's FUN to 200-200.
Did you know Welcome back to the show. I am Andrew Lee. That is Nick Zerwas. That is NASCAR Kelly.
Good morning.
A nickname I suddenly object to now that I know of its origins.
Tough. Deal with it.
We're talking with Cory Campbell, who's running for state senate in District 57, taking on incumbent DFLer Greg Clausen. Good morning.
Good morning.
Thanks for spending some time with us. Thanks for hanging out.
Great. Thanks for having me.
We got a couple of calls. We'll get to those in just a minute. Larry, Dom, hang on the line. The reason I brought you on, the reason it came to my attention was you sent out a press release. Beer and politics.
Yes.
Caught my eye.
Yes.
That was smart. And it's under the guise of the Sunday sales regulation, the Sunday sales ban. But it's not necessarily about Sunday sales.
It will lead to that, but just with the previous segment, we had talked about government regulation,
exactly.
and we were talking about the difficulty that a lot of times Republicans have actually explaining that to the consumer. And so then I was kind of like, well, look at the craft beer industry. This was something that was basically illegal like 6 years ago, and then we passed the Surly bill, and look what has happened. And the whole industry has exploded.
Right.
And the Tribune's actually done some decent articles on this over the last couple of months. They've talking about it's over $1 billion in real estate development. It's helped the local hops farmers. Mm-hmm. And according to the Surly website, there's over 100 of these breweries now around the state. I could probably argue this might be the best thing Governor Dayton's actually done is when he signed this.
It shows what
shows what happens when government gets out of the way.
Out of the way.
And actually, and what really resonates with the public is the Sunday sales. You sit there and say, you talk about government regulation. Sometimes it's these odd, it can
be very technical
stuff, kind of behind the weeds type stuff. But when you say Sunday sales, it's like the government is telling a business owner, you cannot be open on Sunday and sell your product.
Right. You got. I know that guy standing outside your door would really like to buy your product, and I know you would love to sell it to him, but I'm going to stand in between you two and tell you no for completely arbitrary and made-up reasons.
Right. And in my district, especially you get into Rosemont, it's only 15 minutes to Wisconsin. So there are people every Sunday in my district that drive to Wisconsin to get alcohol, and that's lost sales revenue. except, and one guy's like, oh, yeah, there's nothing worse than on a Sunday in the fall, and it's 11:45, and I found out I don't have any beer to watch the game.
Right, exactly.
And so then,
why can't you just plan ahead?
Yeah,
why don't you mind your own business?
It's not. It's not my job as a legislature to tell a business owner how to run their business that way. There are Chick-fil-A and Hobby Lobby do very well, and they are closed on Sundays.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And if a business wishes to be closed on Sunday,
they actually like in the instance of Chick-fil-A, that's a business that actually can receive tangible harm by being closed on Sundays. But that's their values, and they stick to it. But if it's a mall location or if it's an airport location, sometimes they pay a fine.
They pay a fine.
They pay
to do
a
that.
fee.
And they started out as a small business. It's not. Some will say, well, they're a big business. Well, they are now, but they started out as a small bit. And actually, the Chick-fil-A's are all franchised, and each franchise, there's only one owner. It's not like some of these other franchisees where they might, somebody might own 60 to 100 McDonald's, et cetera. The Chick-fil-A is owned by one individual, and that's all that they own. It's just that one store.
Right. Let's get to calls. We've got a bunch of people that want to call in and comment on this. Let's start with Lorraine. Good morning.
Hey there.
How are you?
I am one of those people that is hired to have to do all this paperwork for the government.
Ooh, you're a compliance officer.
Well, I have to do, they make you do sales tax. You have to do it. They make you do use tax, you do payroll taxes, quarterly taxes. But I was wondering if Cory had ever heard of certified payroll reports.
Yes.
Yeah, that is terrible. And there's all these different reports. And then at the end of the month, they want you to do a minority report because they want 30% minority on the job and 11% women.
Do you have to do, okay, tell me about this, what was the first one, a certified payroll report?
Yep, you have to do those weekly. You have to report who's on the job and each day how many hours they work. And if they don't work in the week, you have to fill out a 0-hour report week as well. It's just paperwork, and you're mandated to do it.
Wow.
Good God.
Wow, because somebody just needs to know that information. What's the value? What's the value of that information? What do they do with it?
Because you have to pay. I work for a small business. We have 4 different unions, and they want to make sure you're paying prevailing wage. Well, I'm here to tell you,
oh my goodness,
guy is not getting his wage. You don't think he's going to squawk?
Wow.
These guys want every cent that they're making, and they're getting...
Well, it's not that, and there's nothing wrong with wanting every cent that they're making, but they want to make sure that nobody out there is making a whole lot more than them. That's what that is. They want to make sure that, somebody doing a similar job at a different company isn't making a whole lot more, because if they get that information, then they're going to come back to you and say, well, Joe over there working for your competitor is doing a similar job as mine, and he's making $18 an hour. I'm only making $14, so you have to give me a raise. That's ridiculous. It's none of his business.
And also, I just wanted to say that there is not just one form. Hennepin County has their own form. Minneapolis and St. Paul uses LCP Tracker. Then you've got the Minnesota Prevailing Wage form, and then some people use the federal WH 347 form.
Wow.
So my boss has to pay me in order to know which forms are for which jobs.
Yeah. And that's money that, and I'm glad you have a job, and I'm sure you're grateful for your job. But that's money that your business owner, I'm sure, would love to invest back into their company in some other fashion. That is money that is just going out the door for something that doesn't provide any value to the business owner or provide any value to the end consumer of the business. It's just government compliance.
Or just have like one form and they all accept it.
Yeah. Thanks, Lori. I appreciate your call.
She's like doubling, tripling up her work.
Dom, Maple Grove. Good morning.
Yeah, hey guys, somebody running for Senate?
Yes.
Okay, so...
You're paying close attention, aren't you, Dom?
What's that?
No, go ahead.
Yeah, okay, I'm asking a rhetorical question. Well, first of all, I know he's running as a Republican. He probably has to fine-tune his message to bring in all the people that would not vote for him. For example, the Democrats usually... appeal to the emotional base, like $15 minimum wage.
Dom, we're short on time. Do you have a question?
Yeah, I do have a question, but how do you deliver your message, package your message so that you bring in people that are not necessarily looking to vote for you? Because that's what's going on at the national level. If you want to tie this regulation to your own area, your business, and to the national.
Yeah. How do you do that? How do you?
Well, when we
talk
explain,
to somebody who isn't necessarily inclined
when
to
it
vote
takes a little more time. You got to do this, again, at the door. A lot of times I'm knocking on a lot of doors, and we kind of explain this. And I use the example of the gentleman that we talked about earlier about the heating and cooling business, that these are like hidden taxes. And it does take time. And the Sunday sales also illustrates this as well, that government is mandating to businesses when they need to be open, what they can sell, et cetera. And that's not our decision. And then that does filter down to the employees, et cetera, to the business.
Let's go to Dave Santiago. Good morning, Dave.
Yeah, good morning. Great show as always.
Thank you.
Yeah, I've got a question for you. I recently talked to a winery owner who now they fall under the food handler's license. Wine and beer are now considered food. So now you have to have a different setup in order to serve wine or alcohol because or beer, because that is now considered food, which is a whole new can of worms. More equipment, more headaches in every way, shape, or form. How do you handle government overregulation in that area? Change the rules, and all of a sudden, now you've got additional burden of cost on these owners, and it's not just a quick, change this form or that form. You're talking physically having to change a business.
All right.
Well, yeah, and and back to the craft beer we were talking about a little bit earlier. These aren't cheap to do. I was talking to you've actually had them. I don't know if you had them on this show, Andrew, or if you had them on your Beercast. The Angry Itch guys down there in Lakeville. They had their grand opening just a couple of weeks ago.
Beercast, yeah.
And I went to their grand opening, and their expenditures there's going to be about $750,000. That's their commitment, and that's real money.
Yeah.
I mean, that's real money. This stuff is not cheap to start.
That counts as real.
Think about how many more businesses would open if those costs could be brought down.
A little bit, and they don't have a kitchen. If they wanted a kitchen, that's another couple $100,000 to get a commercial sized kitchen and everything else. They were talking to me about a couple of the regulatory issues as well. But that's what we want to do with this beer tour is kind of highlight some of these places throughout the metro here of what can happen with the government deregulation, these brew pubs and the ones that the microbreweries, et cetera. And the issue isn't actually if you actually like the beer or not. It's just whether you, even if some of your listeners are non-drinkers, it's not the point. The point is the government got out of the way and a whole industry has flourished because of it.
That's a great point, and bringing the people right to the example of how when government gets out of the way, look what is created.
Yeah, instead of talking in the abstract, we can actually point to something and say, hey, because of government deregulation, this is what happened.
And doing it under the context of beer is smart. That makes a lot of sense because that's a very, it's not as technical as the insurance industry, and people don't have, there's not going to be sort of a knee-jerk negative reaction when you talk about a brewery or a restaurant or a brew pub or anything like that, as there would be like, a big evil insurance company. Everybody's had a bad experience with an insurance company at some point in their life, so it's I think it's smart to put it under that umbrella. Nick in St. Paul. Good morning, Nick.
Good morning. I'm excited to hear that you're for Sunday liquor sales. I was wondering your opinion on also allowing just bars to just fill growlers instead of just having to go to the brewery to fill up your growlers. You could go to your community or your local bar and fill up your growler. And I'm wondering if you'd be for that as well.
Yes. Less regular, that's a consumer to a business decision. That's not something that the government really should be involved in.
Right. There's no business. I mean, if you put those rules under any other business and picked any other day besides Sunday, people would look at you like you were crazy. People would think you're just being absurd. I want to pass a law that says you can't sell shoes on Tuesday.
You're a monster.
Isn't that just, it's like the dumbest thing you've ever heard.
Well, I think it sounds pretty logical.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, you would.
Go back to school shopping and see how that would.
You can't sell horse feed on Thursday.
Whoa, Andrew. Get your hands out of my horse feed.
Because I own a horse feed store and I want Thursdays off.
No.
Right? So, and I don't want to have to compete with all the other horse feed stores that might be open on Thursdays. So I want you, big Mr. Government, to tell them all that they have to be closed so that I can enjoy my day off.
But Andrew, that's ridiculous.
Exactly. That's the point we're trying to make.
Thank you. Cory Campbell.
Did you see that he just about fell off his chair?
I really did.
That was pretty good.
I really did. Lump gives me convulsions.
She just gives me cuddles.
She gave me a hug.
Cory Campbell, where can people find out more information about you, your campaign?
Our website, again, it's going to be campbellforsenatemn.com. You can follow us on Facebook at Cory Campbell for Senate, or we are also on Twitter at Campbell4MN, and we are going to be having more of these events throughout the election season.
Fantastic.
Well done.
Well, maybe
Awesome.
we'll figure out a way to get the Minnesota Beer Cast involved in.
Okay, absolutely.
Like I think that'd be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
651-989-58 is the phone number. 5855 is the phone number. Thank you, Cory Campbell, for coming in and spending